In our discussion of creating pulse and feel, we are in lesson module 4, talking about the correct mix on the drum set and how it affects the feel of what we're doing. Now, when I say mix, I don't mean that the engineer is mixing what we're doing. I mean the mix of what we're doing in our own playing. So the overall presentation of what we're doing to the band, to the audience, to the listener. Sometimes I think we think we're playing one thing and we're actually playing another. And guys who don't record a lot will have this experience where they'll be playing, they'll go to a studio and do something and they think they're playing along and they go to listen to it and it doesn't sound anything like what it felt like when they were doing it. Oh, it's not happening, it doesn't blah, blah, blah. Well, that's what we heard, what you played. So it's not like the tape is lying to all of us. We heard that. You didn't hear it because you were too busy playing it. And a lot of guys would come up to me and go, I'm really better alive, better playing live than playing in the studio. And I'm like, no, you're probably, equally bad at both, but, we don't have to hear it again live. It's gone. But in the studio, we have to keep hearing it over and over again. So it's a different concept, a different understanding of things being corrected in many different ways, a lot of things that we're talking about. We need to be able to control the mix of what we're doing for a bunch of different reasons. The first is it dramatically affects the pulse and the feel of what's coming from this instrument. The second is it dramatically affects the convincing manner at which you can play different music styles. Meaning if you don't have the right mix in swing playing, the bass drum's too loud or the hi-hat and ride aren't loud enough, it's not going to sit correctly and you're not going to sound convincing at what you're doing. And finally, the third part is that without having the correct mix coming from us, from our instrument, from the drums, we lose the ability to capture our performances with stereo microphones. That means the overhead mics become less usable, the room mics become less usable, a stereo mic out front of the band becomes less usable because your mix is so off. One of the most common things that I hear is that guys, they play their cymbals and hi-hats too loud. What happens if you play the hi-hat too loud is it spills into everything, but especially the snare drum microphone. So then when you go to mix the drums, the engineer, he can't turn the snare up because it's got so much hi-hat in it. And you'll see guys do everything from duct taping cardboard to the snare mic to stop the hi-hat from bleeding in there to all kinds of crazy stuff. I learned long ago doing a lot of sessions to do a couple things with the cymbals. Keep them on the same plane. I don't have any cymbals way up high in the air, the cool china up here that, the chicks dig it when I do this, that kind of stuff. It's more on the same plane. So there's no cymbal that jumps into the overhead mics or the room mic and destroys my mix for the time that I'm hitting it. I can control the levels of these cymbals and how they relate to the room and the overhead mics. Let me give you a demonstration of playing the correct and incorrect mix for two different styles, a rock style and a swing style. When we talk about playing rock music, it's all foundationalized from the bottom up. Kick is the loudest, then snare, and then hat, that riding pattern, needs to sit behind it, and it's just helping the time sort of move along, but everyone's playing and dancing from the kick snare drum relationship. So we don't want to have the riding hand be that loud. It's really just a symbol of lack of technique more than anything. Let me give you an example of how to correct it when it's wrong. I'll play it correct first and then incorrect and then correct it. So here we go. A 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2, 3 and 1 and 2, 3 and 4, 1 and 2 and now here's wrong. You can play half open. it doesn't matter what I'm playing. It's not that you can say, oh, well, when it's half open, it's louder. No, it's not true. You can control the stick height. It's just a different tone. It's a different voice. Now, let me give you a demonstration of playing the jazz, a jazz beat incorrectly and then correcting it. I hear a lot of guys play the bass drum too loud and don't realize that the 2 and 4 on the hi-hat is our backbeat in swing playing. It's the snare drum in a rock beat. So that's what everyone's listening to when we play swing, is that 2 and 4 on the hi-hat. Ka-ching, ding, chick-a-ding, chick-a-ding. That's the backbeat. So the bass drum is the lightest, then the ride cymbal or riding hand is second, and then the loudest needs to really be the hi-hat, depending on the style. If it's big band, it needs to be louder. It's some styles it can be lighter. It just depends on what's going on sonically with the band, but the ride cymbal hi-hat is the key to playing swing, not the kick drum. The kick drum is more accentuating and articulating different things and adding some comping figures and maybe supporting and kicking some things here and there, but not a primary part of the beat. So let me show you the incorrect and correct way for a swing beat. A 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now I'll play the kick drum too loud. I'm taking the presence of the ride and hi-hat away because of that kick drum. Now put it back in the correct volume and change the feel of it. It swings completely different when the kick drum is placed correctly in the mix. One of the things to work on for me is listening to a lot of the different styles and taking note of how guys play the different mixes on the drums. And I had the pleasure of being on a NARAS producers forum years ago. NARAS is the people who do the Grammys. And Phil Ramone, the great producer, was on the panel with me, and I got a chance to speak to him. So I asked him, Phil, besides the obvious reasons, why did you use Steve Gadd on all of those records? You know, there's so many records and sessions. And one of the things that he told me was that Steve had such a perfect mix in his playing that he could put up just a room microphone and maybe a little bass drum or whatever, but a stereo microphone out front, and the drums were done. The drums were mixed, and he had that opportunity to create different sounds. And anybody who's done a lot of records knows that having that opportunity to have room mics up and have that different ambient sound, I mean, that's the John Bonham drum sound, is the room mics. And the only reason that if John Bonham's mix was off in his playing, the sound of Led Zeppelin would be completely different, because they wouldn't be able to use those room mics to create that warehouse drum effect that they have. So let me perform for you some of the different mixes. I'm just going to go through a couple different styles of playing and show you how the different instruments on the kit relate to each other in those styles. You know, I'll play some rock and funk, some Afro-Cuban, some swing, some different things. And I just want you to kind of watch how I'm adjusting the various mixes of the instruments in these specific styles to help create a different feel and especially a different pulse through that style to the listener. So here we go. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3.